Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fascinating journey into the very architecture of human emotion. Have you ever actually wondered what true, absolute devotion looks like? Like, what does it really feel like? Well, we're going to do a highly structured deep dive into the profound mechanics of longing, separation, and ultimate devotion found within this incredibly beautiful piece of literature called Mohabbat-e. We'll be tracing a stunning thematic arc together, going from that very first spark of raw, almost obsessive longing, all the way to the absolute surrender of the self. So let's just jump right into it.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Right out of the gate, the text hits us with this line, and it just repeats it continuously. Mohabbat hai tumse, which translates to, I am in love with you, I am in love with you. This hypnotic, repetitive refrain completely sets the emotional baseline for the entire text. It's not just a casual opening statement, It's literally a heartbeat. It establishes this overwhelming, inescapable truth that anchors absolutely everything else we're about to explore.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 1, the initial declaration of love.
So, we start off with the narrator's raw outpouring of emotion, right before reality kind of gets in the way. Actually, when you look at the source text, the first stanza is literally just that single phrase we just talked about, repeated 5 times. Now, why do that? Well, because this sheer repetition isn't just poetic filler. It deliberately mimics the consuming, single-minded nature of early love, which, let's be totally honest, borders on temporary insanity sometimes. When you're truly in love, your mind doesn't sit around weaving complex philosophies, it just loops on this one undeniable fact. This repetition creates an unwavering rhythm, basically trapping us right there in the narrator's singular focus.
Now, Section 2, Foreign Land and Separation Pain.
But as always, that pure, unfiltered declaration is pretty quickly met with a harsh reality. The text takes a really sharp turn here, bringing us into this painful transition. And this brilliantly illustrates the core tension of the poem. On one hand, you have the pure agony of physical space, the narrator watching and thinking of their beloved from this faraway foreign land, a Pardesh. But then, on the other hand, we see the intense emotional proximity that still binds them. The narrator is living entirely in the mental space of their memories. So the physical distance is vast, it's huge, but the emotional closeness is just suffocatingly tight.
And the text literally diagnoses the narrator with symptoms of longing. It lays out exactly how this separation physically and mentally manifests. For example, there's this very real fear, basically living in a state of pure dread, when letters from the beloved don't arrive. The evenings become this absolute torment, a time when thoughts of the other person just mercilessly tease and torture the mind. Plus, there's this deep, aching yearning for the past. Yearning for those everyday conversations and sweet, intimate meetings that are now just echoes. It's such a universal human experience of missing someone, and it's so vividly captured on the page here. I mean, we've all felt that agonizing wait by the phone or the mailbox, right?
Which brings us to this incredibly powerful, desperate plea. The text says, I remain longing without you here. Do not leave my dreams now. Since any kind of physical connection is impossible, the narrator is basically begging to maintain their bond in the subconscious realm. It's this heartbreaking acknowledgement of how deeply the physical absence hurts, trying to bridge that massive gap with a desperate attempt to hold on to the beloved in literally the only place left, their dreams.
Moving on to Section 3, Letters and the Weight.
So all this immense longing logically transitions the narrative to tangible artifacts. We enter a phase that's entirely focused on the written word. And honestly, before a letter even arrives, the narrator starts creating their own comfort. The text reveals them obsessively writing the beloved's name over and over on pages of paper. Just think about the emotional weight of that act for a second. Thirsty and longing for just a single glimpse of their partner, they pour all their feelings into the ink. Writing the name literally becomes a proxy, a substitute for physical presence. It's a coping mechanism to handle the absolute unbearable thirst of separation. But then, the dynamic suddenly shifts. What actually happens when the agonizing wait is finally over? What happens when that dreaded silence is broken and the awaited letter finally makes its way across all that distance and right into the narrator's hands?
The cathartic relief is just palpable here. The narrator states, this is not a letter, this is your love. This physical artifact carries such immense, staggering weight. To the narrator, they aren't just holding some paper and ink, they are holding the actual, tangible manifestation of their beloved's affection. Reading the memories contained within those pages is described as an expression of love itself. To them, the arrival of the letter is literally the arrival of the beloved.
And that brings us to Section 4, Complete Devotion in Love.
Having received this ultimate confirmation of love, the emotional arc reaches its absolute crescendo. The text shifts gears entirely into this profound, self-effacing devotion. Now, what's really interesting about this part is the specific language the source text employs. We start seeing words like nisar and kurban, and these aren't just casual synonyms for, caring about someone. They carry some heavy, absolute definitions. They mean to unconditionally sacrifice, to surrender, to literally offer up one's life, dreams, or very self for another person. Isolating these words really forces us to grasp the escalating, absolute intensity of the author's devotion. It tells us that love is no longer just a feeling, it's an act of total surrender.
And this surrender creates this incredibly beautiful, poetic paradox. The narrator says, "My defeat is my defeat. Your victory is my defeat." Now, in a conventional sense, that sounds completely contradictory, right? But in the logic of absolute devotion, it makes perfect sense. The narrator has completely, 100% surrendered their ego. The beloved's triumph is so supreme that the narrator willingly positions themselves below it. They take on the beloved's sorrow and celebrate their partner's victory, even if it means acknowledging their own total subjugation to that love.
We see this self-effacement just continue to build. The narrator declares they are ready to completely erase their own future narrative, literally forgetting their own tomorrow, just to validate and support the emotional trials of their partner. They offer to step right in and willingly write the test of the beloved's heart. They're essentially saying to their partner, "Your struggles are mine to bear, and my future is completely irrelevant if it doesn't serve yours." It gets to the point where the devotion is so pure it eventually elevates to an entirely spiritual level. The narrator talks about literally taking prayers directly from the divine just to send them as a message to the beloved. At this stage, their love has completely bypassed earthly limitations. They're acting as a direct conduit for divine blessing, demonstrating the absolute ultimate act of care and spiritual protection.
So the crucial point we arrive at is this climactic line, "Let me sacrifice my dreams for you." This is the flawless completion of the thematic emotional arc we've been tracing today. Think about it. It started with that simple, repetitive, "I am in love with you," moved through the agonizing physical pain of distance, found a little comfort in letters, and finally culminated right here, in the total, willing sacrifice of one's own dreams for the sake of the other person.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to ponder. As you reflect on everything we've covered in this explainer, ask yourself, is love defined merely by the physical presence of a person in your life, or is it defined by this profound, absolute willingness to sacrifice your own dreams for theirs? The anatomy of devotion we've just unpacked suggests that maybe true love only truly begins when the self is left entirely behind. Thank you so much for exploring this incredible text with me today.